Hello and welcome from Montreal, where the 69th annual CFA Institute conference has just ended. Now, the final keynote speaker was my guest today, Sir Bob Geldof.
Hi, John.
Thanks very much for joining me. You have been on quite a remarkable journey from charity in the form of Band-Aid and the Live 8 concerts, then through campaigning for debt relief with the Live 8 concerts and Make Poverty History. Now you're involved with the 8 Miles Fund, which is investing through private equity. How do they fit together, and how did you make that journey?
They fit together in the aid v trade argument, which is doesn't work at all. It is aid and trade, and one begets the other, and eliminates the first one ultimately. And it's self-evident. I mean, if you encounter poverty at the egregious level that I met it in the mid-80s, rapidly you understand that the only way to avoid this happening in the future is economic growth, and endlessly we've seen that again. So it's very boring for me and my colleagues to be lectured by economists who write books on our back, sort of saying they're all wrong, it's all about trade, and all that. Hello, and so I just decided to ultimately do both, mainly the latter because the world was economically expanding at an exponential rate, and this one continent was being left out. So really, obviously I'm not a financier, so all I can do is draw attention to something. And I can market things, and I could market the idea of Africa being an investment hotspot. And some people bought into that and said, well, why don't we'll put the money behind you to do it. And I wasn't interested in it, but they were right. I became very interested in it, mainly because you can see, as transformative as aid and debt relief is, so too business on top of that is the ultimate transformation. Those families, not just the individuals, are never going back. And of course that was evident from the get-go, but it took a while for me to arrive at that point and for the world to be interested in that argument.
Okay, now let's talk about the investment case, which is what most of the people at the conference were bothered about. Africa, as far as your average investment professional concerned, is this blank space on the map. People almost forget that it's there when they're talking about geopolitics. What is the key argument? How can you sell Africa as an investment proposition? What's the top-down reason why you should think there may actually be money to be made by making these kinds of investments that can raise living standards there?
Because, as you say, it is a tabula rasa, it's blank slate. Yeah. You're going from very little investment to rapidly increasing investment. And the turnaround moment came when China started investing heavily in infrastructure there to power their own boom through the resource of Africa. It is the resource motherlode of the planet. Whatever you think about the Saudis, etc., that's it. I mean, only a couple of years ago, British Gas found more gas off Tanzania than in Qatar, so that's just one example. I mean, we can give the percentage figures of how much of the world commodities actually reside there unexploited. So that's the base of it. Now China needed that. So it started building the infrastructure to take that out to feed its own boom. And that people began to look then, hold on, we're going to China and China's going to Africa, we should look at Africa. Some smart people started doing that. Now Chinese labour costs are too high, so the Chinese are actually investing in industry in Africa, having built a lot of the infrastructure. And so you're getting this sort of virtuous loop. And if the government is coherent enough, then what's it used and has the capacity to govern, then you begin to get growth, some extraordinary growth in some of the countries. And remember, half the problem of us talking like this is that people, as you say, view Africa as an undifferentiated whole. In fact, it's 54 countries from tiny size Cape Verde or Togo to the size of Europe, Congo. So, it's beyond enormous. Right. And it's fastest growing population in the world. There'll be 2.2 billion by, I think, 2030 or 50 or something. Most of those kids So you've got this demographic boom. They'll all want, employment. You will get the cities which are expanding rapidly, fastest urbanizing continent in the world, fastest growing middle class. Yes, as I said at the time, they want education and health and water and sanitation, etc. But being kids, having these phones, the largest mobile market in the world, having these phones, they see what everyone else wants, and they want that too. So you see now Walmart going in, I think, spending $2 billion on, supermarket chains and stuff like that. That's not going to stop Pepsi are in there growing chickpeas. Why? To make smoothies for the American market. It's extraordinary what's happening.
Okay. Now, why are we not harnessing it more already? One of the questions that kept coming up when delegates were asking questions to me was about corruption. There is perception that Africa is more corrupt even than the States, even than Asia. Is corruption a critical impediment to getting progress done, in putting money to work?
In some countries it is, but it's far less on a continental and a percentage basis than, let's say, Southeast Asia, where it's about 11% of GDP. These are old figures, but about 11% of GDP. China famously was 13% before Xi cracked down. I don't know what it is now. And then, the cost to America of double reversion taxes and stuff like that, staying offshore and the loss of jobs, etc. So if we take all that as a global picture of corruption, then continentally Africa is about 6%. Now, in some countries, in some countries it's all. Right. Angola would be one where the 17 million people are extremely poor, yet it's one of the richest countries in the world. In fact, during the crisis, amazingly, Angola was lending the old colonial master money, Portugal. As I said, it's odd that, like, Luanda is the most expensive real estate on the planet on its shoreline, but only max 200 people benefit from this. The Dos Santos family, control everything. The son runs the Sovereign Wealth Fund, or the daughter, one of them. The daughter does a load of other stuff. That would be one. On the other hand, you get Ethiopia, which as a government are, pretty clean as far as I can determine, and I know them pretty well. But because of Chinese and Indian business models who write certain payoffs into their plan, at a low level, corruption is entering and filtering into the culture. That needs to be stopped. So, for example, your transformer is waiting in the warehouse, but there's 20 people ahead of you. So maybe you could get yours delivered in a week for, stuff. In a state where the police only get lunch and a uniform, right, then you'll get held up. And like the Congo, for example, they just step into your car in the endless traffic jams, and they ask you for some cash, and it's humiliating for them. At a roundabout in Kinshasa, I met a girl who was a chemistry graduate, and she had her smart dark blue uniform, yellow hat, yellow cravat. She was an MA in chemistry, and she had to be a policewoman on this roundabout with 10 other policemen. Just the cars were snailing around. She opened the door and got in and asked for cash. Now, thing is, or I'll pull you over, sort of thing. But that's right. Pathetic. The Congo has got $28 trillion in the ground. But we keep talking about extractive industries and resources. Only 25% of the continental economy is resources. The rest is proper stuff. It's on the move, it's growing, it needs all the consumer stuff that's possible, and it's reinventing a different type of economy and therefore politics through these phones. Indeed, we all are. We just haven't realised that yet.
Let's now talk about the specifics of the 8 Miles Fund, which has been up for a few years now. We've identified agriculture and consumer as big areas of opportunity. Let's talk about what kind of opportunities have you found in agriculture? What have you invested in?
We've got a beef company south of Addis called Verde Beef, and it's to grow a large herd of cattle for export. So the plan is by the end of next year we'll be exporting about $100 million worth of beef, largely to the Middle East. But from my point of view, and so this is where you get the activist person as opposed to the activist investor, this is fantastic because Ethiopia is the 9th largest cattle breeder in the world, but its beef is at a very low quality, so it only takes about a third of what Brazil and New Zealand get per kilo for their beef. So we need to upgrade that and the skills to do that and the land around it. And so yes, while we're employing lots of people, the benefits that extend out through the family go on and on and on, and that's what I'm interested in, to be honest with you. So the partners in the company, they're interested in making cash. That's their job. And of course, the GPs are looking at them and saying, where's the data? My thing is I'm interested in seeing what this stuff, what this money stuff can do and jobs can do. So the pride thing I've seen in the wineries we have 500 hectares of vineyards in a beautiful part of the world. The River Awash runs through it. We've got 2 wineries in Addis, and we've planted. There was 80 acres, 90 hectares planted. We've doubled that. We've doubled the workforce. Again, the thing I like. All the management now are nearly all Ethiopian in the space of 18 months, and so that skills transfer, that ability. How do you work a company? Because they didn't have it before. They didn't have that knowledge before. Once you have it, of course they're skilled, of course they're talented, of course they're intelligent. That's it for me. The bank in Uganda, the chickens. Agriculture is the basis of all the total African economy across the board, not resources, agriculture. Agriculture is the growth area. But power and infrastructure are an impediment. For example, it costs 10 cents per kilowatt hour for electricity in New York City. It costs 12 cents in London per kilowatt hour. For the average peasant northern Nigerian woman, it's $10 per hour.
2 final questions I'd like to ask. First, a very, maybe quite a personal one. How close are you actually doing any business in the precise area where Michael Burke made that classic report on the famine in Ethiopia that sparked Band-Aid? Are you actually working in the area that was once most afflicted by famine?
No, because that area is still affected by great drought. El Nino and climate change have really hit over the last 18 months. So 10.2 million people are affected by I saw a lot of malnourished new babies, and their mothers don't have milk. However, because of to the point about aid, the solidity of the state has allowed them, it buckled before. Now it's accepted 1 million refugees from Somalia because of Al-Shabaab, the Al-Qaeda offsting, and the war there, into their frontiers. So imagine Germany accepting 1 million Syrian refugees and the problems it's caused. The Ethiopians have accepted 1 million over its border, and I've been in the camps, and they're dealing with it. They're now dealing with, imagine Germany, in North Germany, dealing with 10.2 million people suffering malnutrition. They're dealing with it. Yes, with food aid from the United States, the UK and the EU. And yes, they need seed to plant for next year, or else we're going to have a big problem. But in Mekelle, which was the big town in the region, which I visited first as a war zone, that's really booming. And there's an industrial park going in there. Now, the guy behind the industrial policy, a guy called Arkaby, he was the ex-mayor of Addis, is a very smart PhD. He's the economic advisor to the Prime Minister. And he's written, and if you're very interested, you can read Industrial Policy in Africa. I've read it because he's a friend.
Doesn't sound like a Boomtown Rats album, right? Industrial Policy in Africa.
Check out the new one. It's a concept album.
Right.
It's and they've really looked. They've spent 3 years studying the whole world. And anyway, so they're building these things. Mekelle has got a university of 30,000 kids now. They're building this industrial park, which already has got Korean, Japanese, Indian, Chinese, and American people moving into it. The first one is going to be in a town called Owassa. It's already sold out totally.
Right. And this is all happening in where Michael Burke discovered the hell on earth.
Mekelle is the main city in the region. Out in Coram, which is where the famous report was, that's a small little town. There's a bigger town called Sokoto, which is still entirely agricultural based, and Coram will remain a small town. I mean, Band-Aid and with other people's money built a big hospital there, which just opened a couple of years ago, and I was there last week. And it's great because 60,000 people go through every year, very smart doctors, 2 surgeons, great, it's really serious and proper. And so you see that. And you think, that's mad. I watched telly one day and there's this. But similarly, I spoke at a conference in China one day, and here's these jobs in this winery and this beef thing, or the bank in Uganda. It's bonkers, you know.
So what is good to know at any rate is that the first episode of aid has had a positive, very positive impact on the region.
The first episode of the 80s with, you know, the banging the drum. So Burke let us know what was happening. And Band-Aid and USA for Africa and Live Aid beat the drum. And it created such a furore of international goodwill that you could build a political constituency for change. And so then you began to see people really seriously thinking, how do you correct this abomination? How does, you know, so many extremely poor, how do you get them going? So with China, the first triumph of our century, of course, was the lifting of 400 million people out of extreme poverty through trade. And then you saw the collapse of the world economy because of the poor, because of the onerous behaviour of the banks, you know, and the poor simply not being able to pay the banks back. But you saw the poor getting us out of that mess, the poor in China producing stuff at a cheap enough price we could buy and keep the whole thing turning. But that was only possible because of the poor in Africa, giving them their extractive industries, their resources to power the Chinese, which allowed us to breathe again. So I don't understand why I have to be an economist. It all seems pretty dull gruel to me, but it's pretty straightforward, and the model works. It's just, you know, and it works particularly well if you go in with, one, professionals who really know what they're doing, who know the groundwork, and also with an idea behind it that essentially, one, you have to give as much money back to the investors as possible to prove the model for a start, two, to allow everyone to make a living, but three, to improve the quality of life of the people who work for you, to skills transfer, which they're eminently capable of doing, and to build capacity for a country to be able to breathe, so it doesn't happen again.
This is very, very inspiring. One final, very nuts and bolts question. The bottom line, how much money is 8 Miles making so far? How good a success story do you have?
Well, we haven't made a sale yet.
Right.
And again, stand warned, like, you know, to anyone thinking of going in.
Did you have an estimated IRR then?
Yeah, estimated, like, you know, somewhere between 20 and 25%. I'd say if you were looking at it now, we make 20%, I would say. But given the scale, the advancement of these businesses by the investment, I mean, just in the wineries, we're putting in a new carbonated line, and we already know we're selling 100%. 100% of what we produce. We've got constraints because we're having to plant out the vineyards, we're having to import corks and bottles, and there's a constraint on that. We're using 40, 30-year-old bottles because people, if you were a kid, do you remember giving back a bottle of lemonade and you get, so that's what they do. And, you know, before we brought in mechanization, they were washing the bottles and sticking the labels on. So there's still, we brought all that in. We're now selling at full capacity. We could sell more. We're doing a carbonated plant. That'll be a whole other branch of activity. The market's there. The same is true of the beast. The same is true of, you know, everything. I mean, so I would be disappointed.
Right.
I mean, I push like crazy and they go nuts. But there are huge constraints, you know, so I would say I might be conservative. Yeah, probably, but, you know, or maybe not 20% now, but I would be very disappointed if at the end of the day it isn't north of 25 IRR. Very disappointed. But I'll let you know, like, I mean, that's it, you know.
The FT will be writing it up in due course.
Yes, it will, and I mean, I will be totally upfront about it. We'll have to do 1 or 2 sales before Fund 2, and I really want to do Fund 2 now. Now I've got the bit between my teeth, nothing to do with, like, any money I'll make, I just want to do this. And so within the next 18 months, I think we'll have to do a sale or 2, but we've still got to cash out. We've still got to buy, I think, probably 3 more companies. We've done the due diligence, looks good. Actually, there's 4, but one I think we can pass on. I'm not. It's not up to me. It's up to the guys. But there's 3 that are corkers. I mean, they're complete corkers, and, you know, it'd be great to make them just go pew.
And on that note, we will all look forward to seeing them all go pew.
Copyright 2016 CFA Institute. This program is designed to give accurate and authoritative information in regard to the subject matter covered. It is distributed with the understanding that CFA Institute is not engaged in rendering legal, accounting, tax, investment, or other expert advice. If legal advice or other expert assistance is required, the services of a competent professional should be sought.